Welcome to the Redeemed Vision podcast, where we bring sight to the blind and freedom to those enslaved by our pornified culture. Here, we dive into hard but important topics such as pornography, sexual identity, true freedom, real love, and living marriage well. Go deep with us as we uncover what redeemed vision means for each of us living in the world today. Come to know yourself, the power of redemption through Jesus Christ, the joy of laughter, and how to live in gratitude and wonder. This is Redeemed Vision.
Blessed Christmas to all of you. This is Steve Pokorny of the Redeemed Vision podcast from an outreach of freedom coaching found at freedom-coaching.net, where we are setting the blind free from darkness. It's an honor to have you in this Christmas season, and I hope that your time with your family and friends during the season is truly a grace. And remember, it's 50 days. It's not simply one day. I think this is another one of my gentle pet peeves is Christmas music before Christmas comes on the air, because I think we sometimes get overloaded and miss the meaning and the reason for the season, who is Jesus Christ. So an honor to have you here. And I hope that your festivities continue all the way through what we call the presentation of the Lord on February 2nd, when Christ is offered in the temple to the Father. So with this said, I want to welcome you. Today we have a very special guest who I will introduce in a moment, but I want to let you know about Hallow. It's the #1 app for Catholic meditation and prayer, and I encourage you to download this app today to find peace, to sleep better, to pray more, to deepen your relationship with God. And you can get 3 months free for Hallow. At the bottom of this link, there should be some information here of a link for Hallow, hallow.com/freedom coaching, where if you enter that in, 3 months free. And after you start with that, a paid subscription, it's going to help support the work here of freedom coaching. And for all those who are interested, who want to support the work that we're doing, we do receive donations through our foundation, a tax-deductible donation that allows us to continue to spread this good work in helping others. And the Redeemed Vision podcast is one of the ways we get the word out into the world. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you Dr. Greg Bottaro. He is a clinical psychologist. He's the founder of the CatholicPsych Institute. He received his doctorate in clinical psychology from the Institute for Psychological Sciences, the IPS, very close to where I was studying at the John Paul II Institute. And this institute is dedicated to integrating Catholic psychology and theology with a sound, empirically validated psychology. So this may, for all those who may have a kind of a bad taste in their mouth about psychology, I think Dr. Greg is going to breathe some very good information and maybe a breath of fresh air into this. For many years, for about 6 years, he actually studied under the mentorship of Father Benedict Groeschel. If any of you are familiar with that or not, that's the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal. They're based in the Bronx, and he left there. We're going to learn more about that story today. And he founded the CatholicPsych Institute in 2012, and this has continued to grow and expand. And one of our coaches, which I will talk about with Dr. Greg, is certainly interested in the work that he's doing, getting involved with this new program that we'll discuss. He lives in Connecticut with his wife, Barbara, and their 7 children, one of which is a newborn. So without further ado, I want to welcome Dr. Greg Bottaro to the Redeemed Vision podcast. Merry Christmas to you, Dr. Greg.
Hello, thank you. Merry Christmas. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you doing today?
Doing well, thanks. Doing well. This is awesome to be here. Thank you for having me.
An honor to have you. And I know, and I mentioned before we got on the call today, how I've been kind of, I don't know if stalking is not the right word, but I've been very well aware of the work you're doing, the team that's behind you. Nobody builds something on their own. We always need to we get an idea, and then we need other people to help on that. And the newsletters that are put out are always jam-packed with really good information. I encourage all of you to check out CatholicPsych.com, to get on the newsletter, to come to learn more. So I want to go back, Dr. Greg, as because it seems that in the world of psychology, right, and that some of that gets a bad rap, especially some people who have gone through a lot of work, maybe with a counselor or with psychology, and maybe it didn't work out the way they did. So can you kind of paint a picture of the psychological world that people find themselves in, and then we'll divert that to the work that you're doing with the Catholic Psych Institute?
Yeah, I think the need for psychology, for understanding our emotional lives, for healing wounds in the emotional life is so apparent. And there's been a lot of really well-meaning people over the last 150 years who have attempted to try to figure out how we work, how to help people who are suffering. And that's all that's all well and good, except that what's been missing is an actual blueprint that's grounded in revelation and reason, and then applied to the psychological sciences to understand the human person. And so without the blueprint, really people are doing the best they can to come up with ideas, theories, ways of working with people, different modalities, different techniques, but it's been completely ungrounded and without foundation. So that's why we're in the situation we're at right now, where all of the secular programs teaching psychology, and even the Christian or Catholic ones, are relying on the secular world of psychology. And it's been completely ungrounded till now.
Interesting. Very interesting. And so you raised a very important word, and this is a word that we use heavily in the work that we do in freedom coaching, but I think some people don't understand it, don't get it, even Catholics. The word anthropology, right? What is your take on that word? Because again, I can go to go to a secular institution, I can learn about anthropology, right? So how does that view of anthropology differ from perhaps a Catholic way, and then how is that implemented and integrated into the work that you do?
Yeah, so it's a great question to start off with, because a lot of times, and we kind of age ourselves or date ourselves here with our ages. But if you grew up as a JP2 generation, with him as our Pope, and so I was born in 1981, and so for most of my life he was the only Pope that I knew. Growing up anyways. And then, he taught the theology of the body, and part of the teaching of the theology of the body, he said that what we need in this world is an adequate anthropology. And there's a lot of history to him using that phrase. And so you're right. If you go to some secular institute, you could get a degree in anthropology, but likely you're going to be studying cultures and traditions, rituals. You look at sort of the world, and you'd study tribal history and culture and language and all these kinds of things, architecture and artifacts and things like that. That's not what we mean by anthropology. What we mean by anthropology is a study of the human person, and then specifically through the lens of Catholic philosophy and theology. And so we have a history of 2,000 years of really good philosophy, grounded on mostly on the work of St. Thomas Aquinas. And then as that's continued to flourish and develop throughout time, we have John Paul II, who has added a significant dimension of bringing philosophy into the 20th century, now into the 21st century, with a deepening understanding of the human person. So that's what we mean by anthropology.
Important, super, super important. And I want to steal a line from Father Thomas Loya. I'm not sure if you're aware of him. He's a Byzantine priest. And he says, we have never really had a discussion about what is health and what is care.
Yeah.
Why? Because we don't understand who the human person is. And obviously the term healthcare, we can take it in a wide direction of discussion. But obviously narrowing the gaze of the work you do, of any counselor that does, they're trying to care for the health and the well-being of the human person. I think that's the well-intentioned modality. But when we don't have this appropriate anthropology, it can get us into trouble, right? So where let's come from the negative first, and then we'll go to some of the solutions, shall we say. What negatives, if we don't have that appropriate healthy anthropology, what are those dangers that can occur, especially if somebody really wants to help another person but doesn't have that adequate anthropology?
Well, that's without a definition of health, there's no standard to measure against. So in every other medical field, in every other form of medicine or any other kind of professional work there is, you've got to have a standard, whether you're drawing up blueprints for a new house or if you're going to the cardiologist. It's like, what is the standard for a good house? What are the codes? What are the ways in which we know that there's proper structural integrity? If you're going to the cardiologist, what does a healthy heart rate look like? What is a healthy blood flow and all these different dimensions, blood levels, chemicals that are in the body? That's the only way that you can actually measure and try to help people get back to the standard. In psychology, it's one of the only fields that has no standard. And so literally every decade, every 5 years, it's actually getting much faster now. There's a redefinition of what it is to be healthy, what it is to be quote unquote normal, or just normed on statistics and things like this. And there are all these moving targets. And so we're proposing to be able to help people flourish and be happy without any grounding in any fundamental sense of what it is to be healthy in the first place.
Yeah, very important. And I think you're raising a critical point here. I use the term, instead of redefining, it's an undefining. It's an emptying of the meaning of everything, right? And if we're taking the idea that there, as you just said, there's no standards, it's a very reductionist view of the human person. We're merely the separation, the tearing asunder of the human person. We're either mere materialists, or we're just these souls trapped in these physical carcasses that we're just waiting to that final breath to be free of this.
Right.
Right. And that, I think that's where we get ourselves into such trouble in the world we're living in, because we have this, if we don't have that appropriate understanding of who we are, how am I supposed to live my life? And so you've got people who come to you who maybe, and maybe this is the next question I want to drive into, right? I'm sure obviously you and your staff have, and by the way, how many other counselors and psychologists work on your staff?
There's about 15 of us right now.
Okay. You got a good group there. That's fantastic. So with this here, obviously you've got a wide variety of people coming in to the work there, who have been involved with other counseling that didn't get them where they were at. So what would you say to someone why the work at the Catholic Psych Institute is going to be different this time?
Yeah, I mean, we start with an understanding of who we are and sort of what our purpose is, and then we have certain standards that we understand, those principles, those rules, those sort of laws of being human, and then from there we meet people where they are. So we have, on one hand, this ability that comes from a lot of really good psychological theory and psychological experience, and to know how to really enter into somebody's world. And that's something that has come from the 20th century, that we've really developed a sense of encounter and experience and accompaniment. And these are all those kind of catchphrases that are used now. And a lot of that has come from secular psychology. And so we have a deep model of what's called the interpersonal psychodynamic theory that we use to really understand how to engage with people where they are. But we never lose sight of that objective truth. And so we can always work towards a goal that's commonly shared, and that we all have an agreement on, that this is where we're moving towards.
Important. So I want to go back even further into your own past, if you're willing to take that jump, right?
Sure.
Sometimes, and this is the work that we find here in freedom coaching, oftentimes, different wounds, different hurts come from us, and we allow God to come into that process, miracles happen. And then from that same place, that those hurts, we end up being of service to others. It's just the weird, wacky thing I like to say, how God works with us. So from yourself, take us back, your experience of growing up in your home and your family, right? No one, I like to say, we all come from dysfunctional families. No one has a perfect experience, right? And again, we don't glorify sin or anything like that, but where would you say, from maybe childhood wounds for yourself, right? has helped you be so effective in the work that you do?
Yeah, so I grew up in a mostly culturally Italian Catholic family,
Mhm.
and so was given a sense of of religion in the faith, but really family was more important. It was like the higher priority on the pedestal. And so that's why I grew up most of my life. And then but my parents had a lot of difficulty. And when I was 17, right before I went to college, they divorced. And
Mm.
so what that felt like for me, and this happens a lot of times with older kids or young adults who go through divorce. It's kind of like a sleeping wound, and there's this way that it kind of festers under the surface. It's a lot different than being a young kid going through divorce,
Mm.
and so for me at that point in my life, I did feel like the rug got pulled out from underneath me, and I went to college with a lot of pain and a lot of confusion, and
Mm.
it was in a sense a good way. It was a blessing because that's when you start searching for your own answers. And so I was at Boston College. I had some philosophy courses with Peter Kraft, and he totally opened my mind to
Mm.
the truth and goodness and beauty of the Catholic Church. And I started reading John Paul II. I read Love and Responsibility. That book itself answered the questions of why I was in so much pain from my parents' divorce. And it made perfect sense to me. And it was like the perfect timing of lining up that intellectual formation with my need emotionally to have that wound understood and healed. And then it set me on a course for the rest of my life where I knew that by bringing together the truth of our faith with the experience of the human person, that I could help more people. And that's what's defined my life ever since.
Awesome. I'm always impressed with those who get real with their wounds, and I think you are an example here. Obviously, it is not a good divorce is not a good in itself, but obviously God, shall we say, writes straight with those crooked lines.
Yeah,
And
I
for
love
your,
that line. It's a perfect way to think about it.
it is, and even more, Dr. Greg, when we think we have it all right, and God writes crooked with our straight
Yeah,
lines, right?
I like that.
Because
Great.
I mean, for myself, I mean, I think like I've got it all together, and then I talk to my wife, and she's like, "Sit down, honey, we need to talk." So that might be just a reason why you're married and have more children than I do. So there we go. Because we may be big shots in our little thing, or people think things of us, but then you come home and you got to get real. I'm like, okay, I got to go kick out the trash and welcome to life, right?
Yeah, I say that the some of us need more kids and different kinds of marriages to really push us to soften up and smooth out the rough edges. So God's still working on me, that's for sure.
Yeah. Oh, I thought I was the only one. Okay, good. So there's hope for me. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. So, one of the things that one of the recent excitements, and obviously there's other excitements that are happening. I mean, congratulations on the birth of your seventh. I know that from what I understand, I've been blessed with 2 on earth, 1 in heaven. When it goes to 3, it moves from man to man to zone defense, and then after 3, it's just okay, another one, come on in. So congratulations
Yeah,
on
there's
them.
no more defense. It's just you're just completely overrun.
If they only knew the power, we would all be dead. So, or at least bound and gagged in some trunk somewhere in New
Yeah.
Jersey. So, one of the things that's been exciting has been the book, The Mindful Catholic, right? From that you were blessed to have. Where I came in contact with that, especially, was through Dynamic Catholic,
Mhm.
and the work from there. And I want to spend a good chunk of our time together talking about this important work, right? And can you talk a little bit about the term? So a multi-layered question here. A, what is mindfulness? B, is there a difference between just mindfulness and Catholic mindfulness? And C, so here we go. I'm laying it out for you. And C, is there a difference between mindfulness and contemplation, or what is the difference if there is?
Sure. So mindfulness is very basic, simple. It's just simply paying attention. It's becoming aware. It's having attention and awareness, specifically without judgment. And what that means is unpacking the layers of the ways our minds work.
Mm.
And when we realize that when we pay attention to something, we're also carrying another current of thinking about what we're paying attention to. So it's non-judgmental awareness of the present moment. But to really understand that simple definition, you have to understand that we complicate our awareness of the present moment by adding thinking to it. And so that's very simple. What mindfulness is it's a psychological awareness or paradigm to get into the cognitive functioning of our brains. And so to answer the third part of your question, it's not contemplation. It's very different. It's something that is just a way to understand the way the brain works. And it ties into contemplation. It moves us towards contemplation. There's ways that it fits along a paradigm of prayer and spiritual development and also psychological emotional health, but they're not the same thing. So that's important to note that distinction. And then the second part of your question, I think, also opens up a lot more need for nuance and interesting pieces here, because there has been a little bit of controversy surrounding this idea, because there is this idea of mindfulness coming from the Buddhist tradition, which also gets pulled into sort of New Age type thinking and teaching. And so it's really important to draw out some of these distinctions. Again, mindfulness itself per se is just a functioning of the brain. It's understanding the way our minds work and then using that knowledge to become healthier. So an analogy to that would be the fact that we have what's called working memory. In psychology, cognitive psychology, we would study, we have the capacity for working memory. If I list a string of digits, how many can you remember? And we all have limitations to our working memory. Another part of intelligence is processing speed. How quickly can you do a math equation in your head? That's another. So paying attention to the present moment and knowing what our senses are communicating to our brain, what I think, what I feel, what I smell, and having that sense of present awareness is another cognitive functioning. Now, there's the tradition of the Buddhist sort of philosophy has taught mindfulness as a step towards what the Buddhists say is the highest point of their development, which is enlightenment. And it's this sense of being connected to the oneness of the universe and not really being a self. Well, obviously, we believe that we are really a self, that the individual is real. And so we would never say you should use mindfulness to get to that goal of enlightenment, Buddhist enlightenment. But that's a very different thing than saying that mindfulness itself is bad. And so if we say, all right, well, if we have a Catholic worldview, how does mindfulness fit into this? Well, we need to have self-awareness, and we need to know the way our minds work so that we can enter deeper into prayer, so that we can be healthier in carrying out the life of virtue, so that we can know, for instance, people struggling with temptations. It's like, this is one of the fundamental concepts of working with pornography addiction. It's like, what's happening in your brain as you're in that pre-contemplative, well, not using that in the spiritual term, but using it in the psychological term, as we're contemplating an action that we're going to take later. We have a stage called the pre-contemplative stage. So it's like, what's happening? Are you aware of the distress that you felt in that other relationship that led to some stress and anxiety that made you feel like you need an outlet that leads towards problematic behaviors? See, being aware of what's happening in the brain prior to those problematic behaviors is mindfulness. So it's awareness of what's happening internally. So that's why it's something that we should develop, we should understand, and we should put into practice ways of getting more clear on what's happening internally. And then it's like, okay, I'm going to go to adoration. I'd love to pray a holy hour. I want to pray a rosary. Gee, whenever I pray rosary, I get so distracted by the second mystery. I'm thinking about, dinner tomorrow night. It's like, how did that happen? Because we don't have awareness or clear understanding of the way our minds work. So that's where these exercises and skills for mindfulness come into play with a Catholic worldview.
This is good. This is very good. And you stole my next question about the Eastern spirituality. So no, this is good. We're tracking in the right direction here. And I think just if I'll give some thoughts, and then you can correct me where I might be wrong. If we're taking the notion, so first part, and then I'll have you respond here, and then I'll make another further commentary on what you said. So the idea of the Eastern spirituality, reaching nirvana, oftentimes is understood in lay terms, is this escaping oneself. I want to become one with a matrix. I want to eviscerate my own identity. Whereas that's not the Catholic view, right?
Sure.
We are called to union with absolute union, capital U, God, shall we say, right? We're called that, but in being united with him, we don't lose ourselves.
Right.
Far to the contrary, we actually find directly ourselves. It's a beautiful marriage, right? The more I give myself to my wife, she gives herself to me. I don't lose myself in there. If it's a healthy relationship, we actually discover ourselves and
Right.
the different gifts and talents that we have. I don't want to squash those of my
Right.
wife. God knows I don't want to be a woman. I know what a woman is. Thank you, Matt Walsh. Right? I want to become more the man that I am. So in a nutshell, and if there's more to say on this, please do. If the Eastern spirituality of mindfulness is about ultimately to escape oneself, the Catholic, truly Catholic understanding of mindfulness is about the ultimate goal is integration of self, and the first key in being able to move down that road of virtue, which is the road to sainthood and sanctity, is to become aware of our surroundings, become aware of oneself, the interior movements of the heart, and especially with what's going on in our mind. Did I get that correct?
Yeah, 100%.
Awesome. Okay, so this would be the second commentary I would have, and thank you for laying this out, because I was looking at helping to lay this to rest there. I think the word that for all of us that I think is so important and that's difficult for a lot of us who have experienced wounds in our life is curious. This is a key word. Is my wife and I, we've done some marriage counseling work, and by the way, to anyone listening to this, if you're having issues in your marriage, by the way, you're not alone. Please check out Dr. Greg's work and his team at the CatholicPsych Institute, because there's a lot of good growth that can happen there, right? And I think key to any of those wounds in relationships, but especially in ourselves, is to be curious about that. And when we connect it, you mentioned about the issue of pornography use, which is our wheelhouse in the work we do, is to paraphrase Jay Stringer, who wrote a book called Unwanted, and said, a person who is curious about these temptations and attachments can do so much more than just a writ of techniques and strategies to combat lust. Right. Mm-hmm. So that whole being aware thing, Dr. Greg, I think you have your finger on the pulse here, because how many of us are really being aware of our internal temperature of stopping in the moment? Where am I at? And I think that, go back to our adequate anthropology, go back to the Garden of Eden, right? God asks Adam, where are you? God knows where he is, right? He's God. He's actually in him, but he wants Adam to know, where is he? Where are you, right? And in order to move forward, we can't do that unless we take that curious approach. So how do you help clients, maybe practical one or two, if somebody's like, I've been living an oblivious life, right? I'm kind of waking up that I've got all these problems going on. And so one or two steps down this road of healthy mindfulness for those who are dealing with things, what would you say to them?
Yeah, well, that's a lot there. So I think, I think if we take a look at this, the couple of principles here. First of all, when we have our fight or flight system, our sympathetic nervous response, where we get, it's a baseline kind of anxiety that's triggered. And whenever that sort of baseline is triggered, the more anxiety we have, the less curiosity we have. So there's sort of a mindfulness principle here that you cannot be both curious and anxious at the same time. And this is really important to understand the pornography addiction cycle, because a lot of times there's shame that gets wrapped into this whole thing. And shame is this fundamental anxiety of separation, of rejection, of estrangement. And this goes back to the garden as well, but there's this being cast out. And when we're cast out and we're isolated, that's really dangerous. And it taps into our deepest survival instinct. It's like, That's what that puts up that system of fight or flight. There's a problem here. So when that system is elevated or increased, our curiosity decreases. We can't do both at the same time. Now, as in our model, and as we train our team to walk with people, what we teach them is that you're encountering others who are not operating out of their best version of self, and they're not able to necessarily open up mindfulness immediately, or sort of like tap into curiosity immediately. So when you're accompanying somebody, sometimes you're providing some of those skills and capacities for the other person on their behalf. So if I'm walking with somebody and it's like, all right, we're going through this, and they're really struggling, and they're filled with despair and filled with shame, and they have zero curiosity, and they have all those things, then we're looking at that and we say, I can be your curiosity for you. Let's point something out here along the way. If we're walking together, it's like, wait a minute, let's look at this right now. Now, you just said you can't do anything right. And I can understand why you feel that way, but you just reached out to me for help. That's interesting. Doesn't that sound like something that might be right? And it's like, all right, so just the disposition of curiosity that we provide the people we're walking with, it almost like causes a glitch in their despair cycle, their shame cycle. And they have to look at that and say, wait a minute, I guess that's true. And then they're probably, depending on how thick it is, they come back. Yeah, but it's just because, I'm supposed to, and I've scheduled, or I paid you already, or this or that, whatever. It's like, okay, well, let's keep walking. Let's see what else we find, because we're not flooded with the fight or flight response. So we're just, okay, let's just keep looking then. Let's maintain curiosity anyway. And let's look at the next thing. Let's look at the next thing. So, and then that breaks open, because our curiosity through relationship affects their system. And so since we're adding curiosity, they're decreasing anxiety, and then they can find curiosity within themselves, and they come up to the place that we've provided them to walk into.
Beautiful. Gosh, it's beautiful. Oh, and the phrase that is kind of screaming in my ears as you're talking is, when we're so close to a problem, we can't see the forest for the trees, right? Yeah. And that whole notion that you use, when we have anxiety, we can't be curious, right? Or when we're curious, truly curious, we can't have anxiety in a certain sense. In our work, we use the term blasted: bored, lonely, hungry, angry, apathetic, stressed, tired, turned on, emotional, depressed. Okay, yeah, that's a mouthful. That's why you say blasted, right? And I would say one of the pieces that I think is important for curiosity, what you're hitting at, and if I can propose this, is you're teaching them to actually have a little bit of awe and wonder about themselves, right? Even in the brokenness, right? I mean, this is one of the reasons why this time is so important. This is a time of Emmanuel, of God being with us, of why we as Christians rejoice in this season, because God really is with us, and He came in the most ridiculously unlikely circumstances. Let's be honest. The King of Kings became the equivalent of an ant, but to show us the way to really be human, not to be an ant, right? And so from here, I think that's the approach. And if God can enter into our own brokenness, then I think we need to do the same thing. And that curiosity goes a long way. And what it actually opens up is that place of wonderment, of awe, and then also of gratitude. That yes, I've got these wounds, but you hit it on so perfectly there, because I think when we're caught in those negative cycles that are just spiraling, and it seems like so many big things and they're flooding us, it's very difficult to be grateful, right? Or we find that. But when we reverse the trend and actually start to have an intentional curiosity, intentional gratitude, then we say, yeah, I do have these problems, but I think they're manageable. I think we can find a way forward in that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, and especially in the incarnation and looking at it in that Christmas lens, I think we can see. I mean, and having a new baby, it's like these things are so elementary to our humanity, and a lot of times I think we even overthink curiosity. And I love how you said wonder and awe, because you have a new baby, and it's like there's no like, you don't need to teach it. It's like there's this new baby, and it's like, oh my gosh, I could get lost for hours. Like, look at these little fingernails and these little tiny little, wrinkles in the hands. And then, it's like, well, look at this little nose. And God has just built it into our humanity that if we pause and take even 2 minutes to just look, it's hard to not be filled with wonder and awe. And, we start that way with wonder and awe. The baby's looking at their own hands. That's an image I use teaching mindfulness. It's like, that's real curiosity. And it's not this like over complicated thing, even with gratitude, which obviously is really important. And it's a beautiful idea. And it's something to work on intentionally. But I think even that, sometimes we overcomplicate it. And it's like, well, gratitude really just kind of brings us to wonder.
Yes.
And it's a door that as adults we can walk through to get back to wonder. But when you start off as a baby, I don't know that a baby even, there's no gratitude in the baby's heart, but there's definitely wonder. And it's almost a more elementary experience to get back to. And that's kind of coming full circle. We can now find the place where we end with mindfulness, which is to return to being like children. And when we're told to not be anxious about the ways of our life, the things of our life, and to know that we are children, and that Jesus says we have to be like children to enter into the kingdom of heaven. It's because children know that they're taken care of. And we complicate all this stuff as adults. It's like we're supposed to be taking care of everything. We have to fix everything. We have to be self-sufficient. But at the end of the day, we're supposed to be more like children, not like mini gods walking around creating and sustaining our own universes. And that's what this whole thing is. The more we try to be like gods, the more anxious we're going to be, the more things get messy, the more we try to numb ourselves or distract ourselves from how bad we are really at being gods. And then we can always have this pathway opened up to us, which is like, just be more like a child.
Oh, it's so clearly important. I'm the couple phrases that are striking me as you're saying is, unless you become like a little child, you cannot enter the kingdom of God. You cannot be a part. You cannot receive from me. And this is such a hard thing, especially I see with the clients we work with, right? And pride is obviously the root of any sin, but especially when we're dealing with lust, like, because there's been a perceived or real lack, a deprivation that's happened, and this is my area to control. And especially if there's been a wound, especially regarding a member of the opposite sex, especially from a male to a female perspective, this is my time to control. In a certain sense, we were never called to control. We're called to, like the infant, to receive. That's our primary modality. And it doesn't mean that as we grow up, there aren't areas of influence that we have to tend to, but that's the difference. It's the difference between tending and taking control of for domination. That's not the way of the Christian, right? And so in this whole thing, right, the other thing that is striking me here, Dr. Greg, is I'm thinking about the work of Saint Ignatius, for instance, right? His discernment of spirits. And that has been, it's obviously very popular. It's still very popular, and I think it will always be for all time. Obviously, a gift that was given to him. How would you say that this mindfulness fits into this discernment of spirits?
Well, I don't know if that's a leading question or if you're already aware of the fact that we have our second course,
Wonderful.
Catholic Mindfulness 2, is the discernment of spirits. So it's a perfect fit, because one of the most popular authors on discernment of spirits who I've learned from is Father Timothy Gallagher. And he teaches a basic paradigm for discernment of spirits, which is awareness, understanding, action. The first step is awareness, and then we understand what we're aware of, and then we're set to take action. And so the discernment of the rules, the spiritual exercises, are really the understanding part. And before we get to understanding, we have to have awareness. So Catholic mindfulness is awareness. And then once we have awareness, then it's like, all right, now it's another way to look at it is we move towards hearing the still small voice that we all have within us. Like Elijah had to go to the cave, and then all the storms come and all the noise comes. That's like us in our normal life with technology, with the apps, with our phone, with texting, with busyness, with all the stuff. Those are the storms coming by. And we usually just think that's where we're going to find all our answers. If we listen and quiet down, we get to the still small voice after all of that. And that's what Mindfulness 1 does. It takes us to that point where we can hear the inner voice, that still small voice. Then the question is, what is it saying? Now you have to, because that's the voice of God who speaks in silence, not in noise. So it needs to be translated. We don't know that language.
Not most of us.
Ignatius provides the translation. It's like Rosetta Stone for the spiritual life. It's like here you can now know what it is that God is actually telling you when you open up that silence. And that's really what the second step is. And then you go through that and you can understand, okay, at this point in my life, because this is what's happening and I can understand this is what God is telling me, this is the action that I need to take.
Wonderful. Okay, so let me get that straight. So you've got, first it's the awareness, right? And then it's identification of that. And then the third is obviously, how do I act on that? I got those 3 steps, correct?
Yeah, Gallagher will say awareness, understanding, action. So understanding or identification, but it's to understand. Yeah, is this a voice of desolation? Is this a voice of consolation? And then there's all the rules that go along with it. If it's desolation, do this, this, and this. If it's consolation, do this, this, and this. Don't do this, don't do that. It's like all those rules are part of understanding what is actually happening in the interior life and identifying what it is that we're being called to do or not do in this given context.
Okay, wonderful. And I think for all of us, this is key for all of us. I think is life is spiraling in many cases out of control in a lot of areas. That's the way it feels for a lot of us, right? Yes, we're on this podcast here. We don't have it all perfect. We're still working on things, right? And from that here, though, right, that awareness does come first. That's where the mindfulness comes in, to identify. And this is where discernment, to see what is and what is not. This is where redeemed vision comes in. Can we see the goodness of ourselves? Can we see the goodness of others? And in the midst of all of that, even if the relationships are not perfect, can we see how God is working? Critically important. And then the third step, I would say, is now how can I bring a virtuous action into this relationship or into this situation?
Yeah.
Oh man, this can be a game changer for so many people who have just been lost for a long time. And
Absolutely.
has this been launched yet? Is it launched?
The second course? Oh yeah.
Okay. So what's been the feedback coming from people who have gone through this course?
Yeah, I mean, these are really important connections, and people love it because it's a real humanization of the spiritual teachings. And this is what's happened, in a lot of ways. We're carrying on in whatever small part we can, the work of John Paul II, which is to contemporize the traditional truths of our faith. And so when he created his entire philosophical system of personalism, where he added contemporary philosophy called phenomenology to the traditional Catholic philosophy of Thomism, he updated it for today's world, and that's where the theology of the body came from. We're doing the same thing. We're saying, okay, we have the spirituality of abandonment to divine providence. What does that look like in today's language, where people understand their emotional lives more than they ever did before, or they think about psychological things more than they ever did before? We can update the work of with reverence, Jean-Pierre de Caussade, to be more translatable and understood by today's generation. Same thing with Ignatius of Loyola. So it's great to have these ideas, which obviously are, doctorate of the church worthy, but it doesn't mean anything if the local 8th graders or local high school seniors never pay attention to it, never read it, never understand it, don't know how to put it into practice. So all we're doing is saying, hey, let's build a little bridge here. And let's say, okay, these are these great ideas, but what does it mean to have awareness? And not everybody is going to be spending 4 hours a day in silence. We're not even 100 years ago. Maybe you were spending 4 hours a day cultivating your garden or tending your animals. You'd have more silence built into your day normally, where today people are all over the place. So we need to create opportunities. And that's what we're trying to do with our courses, and give people that updated experience of timeless truth. And so it's working. People love it. People are connecting with it. And it's been the most blessed part of this work is to be able to share in my vocation, with so many people having, good, faithful Catholics coming up to me after going through the first course, the second course. And in some cases, I've had people in tears who are faithful Catholics, like daily mass going Catholics. It's telling me I never really understood how much God loves me. This changes everything. And it's like they're the ones praying rosaries every day and going to daily mass. Like this is not but the experience matters. And just imagine if the actual church going rosary praying Catholics also were having these experiences, and then evangelization takes care of itself. It's like when you know the love of God at that level, it's like, of course you want to share it with other people. And then of course it becomes, it's not just arguing points about, well, this is what Catholics think about homosexuality, and this is this, and this is that. It's like, I have to go to confession now, and like all these arguments that people have. It's like, just be loved.
Yes.
And people are hungry. They're craving for love. And if we actually could have that and experience that and then share it from that place, I think the world is a better place.
Amen. Oh man, you're hitting on this is so important, because this is, I think, going back, if we're going to bring this conversation circumsessive in a good way. And there's your $1.50 theological word. Go look it up, people. When we think we're doing all the right things, this is when God breaks in. This is what Christmas is all about, right? God comes to break in to, Pope Francis said this, right? To go make a mess of things if we understand the appropriate understanding of that terminology, not of everything, but of the things that we think we're doing right. But is God really directing that? And at the root, if we're doing all these things, but we don't know that we're loved fully in all the aspects of who we are as human beings, then something is going to be lacking. And that is going to become a powder keg that's going to explode in certain ways. And for a lot of people, it's lust. Some people, it's anger. Some people, it's just a bad worldview. Yeah. And so getting that back is so critical. So I just want to say thank you, Dr. Greg, for what you're doing. And I think two final questions on this segment. We have a small thing we're going to do with you at the end. You'll see it. You'll like it. I promise. Okay. You obviously, one of your backgrounds is spending 6 years studying under Benedict Groeschel, right? And with the CFRs. What was his work like for you? Why was that so impactful for you? How have you seen that impact the work that you're doing currently?
Yeah, it's a little less than 4 years I was with the
4
Friars.
years, okay.
And but then I did study with him at IPS. He was teaching at the school. And so I probably 6-8 years maybe in total actually learning from him. And he was a priest, a Franciscan first, but then he went to get his doctorate in psychology to be able to really to help other priests who are struggling. And then he kind of had a platform. EWTN gave him a platform, and then he was writing a lot of books, and he was doing a lot of the work to attract donors and benefactors for the Franciscans and the work they were doing with the poor. And so he was just an example for me of somebody who deeply integrated the faith with a deep understanding of the human person and humanized it. And it's the incarnation again. It's everything about just God wants us to know how real the divine life is in our own context. That it's not meant to be this far and away thing. It's meant to be as close as our own skin. And that's why he in the flesh, in the incarnation is just showing us what that perfect unity looks like. And it looks human. And it's obviously more than this side of what humanity is, but it's still human on the other side. And so Father Benedict was just a walking example of that, and everything he taught and he did. I mean, he's got a great book called Spiritual Passages that we use in our certification program, and I would recommend everybody to read that book. It's an understanding of the spiritual life, but in psychological language. And he wrote it in the 80s. And he's, I would say, like one of the first people to really put out some integrated Catholic psychology in a really deep integrated way. And so, but he's been everything to me. And then personally, he helped me through my own discernment when I was in the Friars, realize the deeper wounds that I was actually unhealed of before discovering my true vocation, which was to marriage. and he was fundamental and instrumental in that for me, uncovering those wounds, working through them, and then finding that real call of God in the still small voice, and eventually going through that process of leaving the Franciscans. I was in temporary vows, but it was still a very difficult process. I was there, like I said, 3.5 years. And for all intents and purposes, I was in it for life. And I was sold on that being my vocation. So it was a bit of a work in progress there to get through that. But he was the one that made it doable.
Amen, amen. And the CFRs, for those who are unaware, are not lightweights in the spiritual realm by any means. So I thank God for the work of Father Benedict and the work that he has done totally to, I would say, helping heal a lot of the wounds in the church. But also, you were obviously a recipient of that, and I'm sure that there are at least 8 people in your life personally who are receiving the benefits of those graces. One of them named Barbara. I don't know the other 7 yet. So here we go. So praise God for that. For those who don't know, Barbara is his wife's name. Okay. So and then the final question in this segment that I want to ask is, you have a perfect lead in, and one of our coaches who you've been in touch with, Chris Chen. I want to give him a shout out. He is very interested in your certification program, and you hinted at and you talked about it. Can you give? And you're inviting obviously people to come. Can you share a little bit more about that? What that entails for that certification and why they should come?
Sure, there's a lot to it. We do periodic live calls about it. You could sign up at CatholicPsych.com/open house. Sorry, that's not the right URL. It's iddmentor.com/open house, and it's a second website we built for this new model that we've developed. And in our model, we've integrated Catholic philosophy and spirituality with psychology. And essentially what I've done is I've said, okay, after 20 years of some of the most blessed, in some cases, it can feel really lucky at times, but it's obviously always providential that God has lined up certain people in my life at certain times. And I've really had just an overwhelming blessing of being educated by some of the greatest minds alive. And, Peter Kreeft was just the start. And then after that, it was Father Benedict Groeschel and a number of other people more in the world of Catholic psychology, Catholic philosophy, that have brought together through the synergy of all these different places and voices, a sort of core model of what it is to do what we're doing right now. And so I've just felt a real conviction and responsibility to articulate this and put this out there to share with the world. I've been slowly developing this within our team at Catholic Psych because of just, this is what happens. So I started private practice. Somebody comes up along. They're like, hey, can you train me? It's like, sure. And then it's 3 people. And then it's 7 people. And then it's 12 people. It's like, oh my gosh, we're like building out a training program here. Maybe we should do something with this and share it with more people, not just keep it in-house. And so that's what we've been doing. So since January of 22, I really discerned this through last year in 2021 and basically just stopped all my other work. And then January of 22, I told my team, I was like, I'm going to go in the janitor's closet. I'm going to close the door and I'm just going to start writing. And, I had some research assistants who are helping me, and I've been building out this program. We launched it in October. We have a limited cohort sizes because we actually take very seriously the pedagogy, which is of accompaniment. It's not just book learning. We actually walk individually with every student, and we provide each student mentorship and guidance. There's a capstone project. We help students build out business plans or ministry plans for how they're going to use this in the world. And this is what we're a bit of a work in progress right now. We're still in sort of a pilot phase, but it's been amazing. And so, yeah, this is the next step for us.
Awesome. Fantastic. I love it. And I love the fact, especially it's a hands-on approach, individualized attention as you're going through this. And so who would you say, so again, a follow-up question to that, who would you say that this certification would be right for?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, again, more of this, you can definitely find it if we do an open house and really open all this up. But our model is bigger than a psychology model. And what I mean by that is the science of psychology limits their understanding of the person to only which is scientifically observable. And we understand so much more about our humanity because of the revelation of faith.
Yes.
And so if we take Gaudium et Spes seriously, that Christ reveals man to himself, then we could say, well, okay, what can we know about man through the revelation of Christ? And so then our model that we develop to walk with people, work with people, accompany people is built not just on what's coming in from the psychological sciences, though we do reverence that because that's part of our human intellect and that's part of our own creativity and everything else that God has endowed us with. So we use the sciences, but we also add to it our spirituality and the anthropology of that Catholic philosophy. And so we're building a project, a model that's bigger, and we've created a modality that's totally outside of the box from anything in psychotherapy. We actually walk with people, work with people on a daily basis. We don't have weekly 45-minute appointments. We do daily work with people. We really get in, we really open stuff up. And so, long answer to your simple question, this is for a lot of different kinds of people who are, it's basically for anybody who is regularly working with the emotional burdens of somebody else. And so we have priests in our program. We have missionaries in our program. We have psychotherapists in our program. We have coaches in our program. And we have actually some of the people that signed up initially also are just parents doing the most important vocation ever, which is to raise children. And that is,
Amen.
That's also a way in which people can be really benefited in having this deep integrated vision of the human person. It's like even in parenting, especially in parenting, it's really important to see things that way.
Oh, critically important. Oh, I love this aspect, and I think if this is a prompting of the Holy Spirit, which I believe it is, Dr. Greg, right, then go with it. Vaya con Dios, and especially for any of those who are hearing this that have an ounce of wanting to help others, especially those, because I think in the world we're living in, there's so many crazy emotional wounds that have been opened up, especially from the brokenness of marriage and family, which you and I are a recipient of, that those things really can be healed. And when we've got somebody who is willing to walk that path there, who has received some training, how to do this effectively in a way that integrates them as a human person, is only going to benefit their relationships. And because we are all connected on some level, that's going to benefit the world. So thank God for the work that you're doing, Dr. Greg. And so open-ended question here to you. Is there anything else you'd like to add to this part of our discussion here before we move on to something a little more light and levity for this? And how would you recommend people get in touch with you?
Yeah, definitely just check out either that open house website at iddmentor.com. And that's where we talk a little bit. iddmentor.com is where we launched this new model of walking with people, a new methodology called mentorship. It's integrated daily dialogic mentorship. And that's sort of what we've formulated based on a Christian anthropology. And then the open house is where people can sign up to hear more about the actual certification program. Otherwise, we have more at our other website, CatholicPsych.com, and that's got a blog. It's got our podcast. It's called the Being Human Podcast. We have the newsletter there that you mentioned that people can sign up for as well.
And also, I didn't compliment you on the podcast also. Many tremendous things. I think the last one I heard in my plethora of free time, which is not and the genius of woman and digging in deep on there. I think the 5 aspects of that, which was really, really enlightening. So the more I can come to understand my wife, the better for everybody in this household.
Yeah. That goes for all of us.
So there is hope, there is healing here, and I encourage all of you to check out the IDD mentor.com /open house, also CatholicPsych.com to get in touch with Dr. Greg. And so, Dr. Greg, we do something a little fun here at the end of our podcast. We call this the 12. We want to get your take on this. So this is completely off the beaten path of what we've just been talking about. So clear your head a little bit. No, we can't fully do that as we just talked about, right? But clear your slate a little bit. And these are just your initial impulse answers. They're kind of fun. How you'd answer them. Don't give it too much thought, and just helps us to get to know you a little better. Are you ready for the 12?
Sounds good.
Here we go. Number 1. Peanut butter, crunchy or creamy?
Crunchy.
2, if you could be any Star Wars character, who would you be?
Oh gosh. Obi-Wan.
Obi-Wan, there you go. You need to grow the beard, buddy. Get working on it.
Yeah.
Number 3, what is your desert island food?
Oh, desert island food.
If you're trapped
Chicken
on a
nuggets.
desert island. What chicken nuggets?
Yeah.
Okay, then. All right. No judgment. No judgment here. All right. Number 4, beer or wine?
Beer.
Follow up, what kind?
Dogfish Head. 90-minute IPA.
Oh, there you go. Okay, great. Number 5, we're in this season of the Christmas season. So what is your most memorable Christmas gift growing up?
Very young age, I got one of those little spin seats where you sit down and you can
yes.
you twirl yourself around.
Did you have to wear a helmet?
I did not have to wear a helmet. There were no helmets in our house.
Exactly. What's a helmet? Exactly. All right. Why how most of us survived the 80s? I'm not sure.
It's a miracle.
It is a miracle indeed. And proof God exists and he loves you. All right. Number 6. What is your bucket list country or city?
Love to see Dubrovnik.
That's a good one. Wonderful. Number 7. If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Flying.
We're like 90% on the podcast for that. There you go. I have theories on it, but we'll hold my tongue. Number 8. Have you seen The Chosen?
Yes.
Okay. Impossible question. Follow up. Favorite episode? If you can only pick one.
Oh gosh.
I know. You're welcome.
No, I can't. There's no way. It's definitely hard to pick. I can't even think. Oh, I mean, part of it is I binged it all so fast that I don't think I even have a separation of episodes.
So what scene? What scene? If you could pick one scene, what scene got you the most, or close to that?
I love the little nuances of Christ's humanity, like him laughing about, like when they're playing cards and then they're like, somebody's like, oh yeah, Peter played some great hand. And then I think Mary says, like, I didn't see that coming. And Jesus goes, I didn't even see that coming.
That's awesome.
Like little like twists like that are just like, man, he's so human. It's awesome.
Yeah, and it shows that integration, God is not just mere spiritual, but in Christ is very human.
Yeah, actually, I'd have to say the most impactful is when he sees Mary Magdalene for the first time, when he names her. That one chokes me up right now just thinking about it. She's coming out of that bar, and then he names her.
Yeah, and he names us too, which is good. Speaking of name, number 9, besides your name and the date, what do you want on your tombstone?
He tried.
Good. And I'll follow it up for you. Maybe you can use this for meditation. Anything worth doing is worth doing poorly, Greg. So yeah. There we go. All right. And number 10, if you had to pick a favorite saint, who would it be?
St. Francis.
St. Francis. Wonderful. Okay. Number 11. This is a tough one, maybe. If you were to be martyred, if you had to be martyred, how do you want to go out?
Oh boy, the instrument of death.
I'll let you pick it.
Oh my gosh, as easy as possible. Some kind of poison I have to die in my sleep with.
In your sleep, got it. Okay, good. So no suffering for you. We got it. All right, good. And then number 12, why be Catholic?
It's the only thing. It's just what's real. It's the only answer.
Beautiful. It's real. We encourage all of you to get real with yourself, to get real with your families, to go deep, to get curious about these, because that is your way to healing and wholeness. So Dr. Greg Bottaro, for all of us at Freedom Coaching and the Redeemed Vision podcast, an honor to have you with us. Blessings.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
An honor. And for all of us at Freedom Coaching and again, the Redeemed Vision podcast, we believe that nothing is wasted and everything is redeemable. So today I encourage you, from what Dr. Greg shared, to be mindful, to be aware of where you are at. And if you need healing, go to the one who is the healer, the one who has come in the flesh in this Christmas season to transform everything. Healing and wholeness is waiting for you. And so until next time, I'm Steve Pokorny with the Redeemed Vision podcast. God bless.
The Redeemed Vision podcast is an outreach of Freedom Coaching. To learn more, check out freedom-coaching.net and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and MeWe.